I'm Pat Collier, professor of English emeritus at Ball State, and Jim is professor of history at Ball State. And so I'll pass it over to Jim to start us off.
Thanks. Thanks to everyone for coming this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are. I do want to note that Hafiz is on this. Hafiz is our managing editor, so I want to say thanks to him for all the work he's put in. When you go to our archive, you're looking at his work primarily with this. I'm also the director of the Center for Middletown Studies, which is it's in that role that Pat and I came together on this project. I'm assuming everybody kind of knows what Middletown Studies is, but just to refresh your memory, Robert and Helen Lind came to Muncie, Indiana in the 1920s to study ordinary life in an industrial community. They produced a book called Middletown, a study in modern American culture, which came out in 1929. It was enormously successful. It's one of the most influential portraits of American life produced in the 20th century. It was so successful, its publishers commissioned a sequel, which the Linds provided in during the 1930s. And from there, other researchers continually came to Muncie, and we established this pattern of people studying Muncie up close as a way of examining larger cultural and social trends. And it's in that spirit that this project is undertaken on the same city, Muncie, which is the location of Ball State University, where Pat and I both work. Um, a couple things you'll see as we go forward. One is that while we're drawing on this tradition of Middletown studies, we're also departing from it in terms of the approach, and Pat's going to talk a bit more about that in a few minutes, and I think you'll see that as well. And then secondly, the original Middletown study was a study of a recently industrialized community. And what we're looking at now, what's perhaps hinted at in this image, is that the city is now very much a post-industrial place. Its manufacturing base left in the late 20th century, in the beginning of the 21st century. And so now it's a city facing all the challenges that post-industrial places around Europe, as well as the United States, are facing with this. So that's kind of the context for our project. I'm going to turn over to Pat now, who's going to talk a bit about other sources and inspirations for this project.
Mhm. Right. So when we started this, kind of the idea was to merge the ethos of and the methods of mass observation, particularly in the 1930s iteration, the original mass observation, with Middletown studies. And so, the project was to create an archive of everyday life, but the spin from mass observation was to do it just in this one community, which is this community that's been sort of heavily studied, right? And so we also launched the thing with the notion that it was, very much inspired by mass observation, that it was a collaborative art project rather than a social science project, right? That it was a project that was going to tap into the kind of latent creativity of ordinary people. And so we started building this archive with the day diary as its primary artifact back in 2016. And over the almost decade since then, this is basically what this is the form the archive has taken, right? So this is about what we've got after almost 10 years of collections. Um, if you add it all up, it's about 700,000 words. I looked it up again to make sure I was right about this. It's about two Russian novels. It's a text about the width of two Russian novels. Not if it's not if it's War and Peace. It's about 1.3 War and Pieces. And now we're in the process of transitioning to, writing a book about this. And in the spirit that we started it, as the archive as as a collaborative creative work, we're really reading it using the methods of sort of literary scholarship and literary analysis. We're reading the archive as a collaborative creative work. And so, as Ben mentioned at the start, we're about at the end of writing a book that basically analyzes the archive, treats the archive as a literary text, and sort of historicizes and contextualizes the archive. And so, I'll turn it to Jim to just give you a quick look at the shape that the book is taking.
Right. So you see, this is the outline for the project. A couple things I'll just point out. The after the introduction, the first chapter examines what we think of as a structure of feeling that's particular to a post-industrial place like Muncie. And so we're exploring the ways in which living in a post-industrial place registers in the everyday and how that registers and what that means for living here and makes living here distinctive. I know a few of you are familiar with some of the work we've done around the pandemic. We had the good or bad fortune of being engaged in this project in the middle of the pandemic. And so we collected some interesting observations about life during the pandemic. We also have chapters looking at work and caregiving. Caregiving is an increasingly important part of the local economy. So it's not just a domestic enterprise, it's also an economic activity. And then we wrap up with a couple of chapters, one on the changes in media in terms of everyday life and the diaries we've collected, and then the role of politics in everyday life. You'll see too, we've interspersed these with what we're calling inner chapters, which are short theoretical reflections, a little bit experimental. It allows us to explore things a little more abstractly than we do in the main chapters. And so one of the things we're trying to do is um, sort of pull this together as we finish the book. And we're sort of going back to the sort of original questions we had around crisis and around community. And so Pat's going to talk a little bit more about that and how those ideas, how we're working out those ideas at this stage of the project.
Okay, yeah. So we're if you look at the outline of chapters here, the bit we're writing right now is this inner chapter on crisis. And so we're really trying to think through the way that the notion of crisis has informed the project from the start, as well as the way that that also is a way is a concept that ties us back to our kind of inspirations of mass observation and Middletown, but also the way it puts us in dialogue with the scholars we're reading now who mainly kind of hail from the world of cultural theory and affect theory specifically. And so in the bit I'm going to go through now for about the next five or so minutes, I want to talk about crisis as it's informed the project and as it informed mass observation and Middletown. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Lauren Berlant and her concept of the crisis ordinary as a framework that is emerging as I think really useful to think about how crisis informs this archive.